Hey, here out in the garage with TheEZGZ, and we're going to proceed with our engine build. I wanted to give you guys an update and let some newbies who are thinking about following my footsteps give them a little insight as to how things took place, and this project is getting way out of hand. It started out with a conversation with a local fellow about some inexpensive heads that he picked up and used, and they worked out fine for him, and I thought I would do the same thing. And I had this little engine on my Baja. I didn't know what it was. It came in the car, and I couldn't seem to get it to run the way I thought it should, just from different tuning things. So took it apart, and sure enough, the heads were worn out that were on it. They were the old German heads, and the valve guides were completely shot. So I thought, since these are 85.5, I would go ahead and get some new heads. Prior to that, though, I assumed that this engine was larger than a 1600. I thought it was a 1776 or an 1835, both of which would take a larger head. And so I had gone ahead on my friend's advice and thought I'd give these replacement heads a try. Well, as it turns out, the more I look at them, the more I work on them, the more I don't like them. I've been working on them. I've probably got 10-12 hours in these heads. I looked between the fins, and the casting flashing was in the way. I can't see anything down there. Somebody had taken like a bandsaw and just made a small slit between these fins. I started looking at them, and a lot of these holes didn't go completely through, and a lot of that isn't just flash casting. That's actually misalignment of the mold, and I can taper that. And I broke a couple of Dremel burrs trying to do some aggressive work, but I enlarged the holes. I got some airflow in here. If you'll notice, there's a pocket right here where my thumb is, and it kind of like, hey, what's the deal with that? It's a dead end. There's nothing going through, and there was all this metal on the other side of it, and I thought, well, that's not going to work. The tin goes off the top of that, and the airflow is going down. So I ended up making a hole through that, and on the other side, you can see it. I made that hole down here where my finger is. If you look at that same area, let's turn this head around on this old original head. Here's what I'm talking about. You can see right through here. See, that's a casting, and it goes right through there. And let's just count these. You got 1, 2, 3 ribs here. You can see the difference. It's down behind the spark plug. There's passages for that air to flow across, pick up the heat, and go all the way across. Now you look at this one over here. There's only 2. I'm missing a fin here. That one didn't go through. There's all this blockage in here. A lot of those were closed. I had to open them up. And the more I looked at them, the more I thought, man, I don't really like these. And I've been getting wrapped up in Darren's video with his 2110, and I see all the nice stuff that he's putting into that, and I thought, you know, maybe these will work. And I have several engines that take this size head, and I thought, you know, maybe I'll use them sometime, but for right now I thought, yeah, I'm not sure I want to do that. So anyhow, I was looking at the valves that came, and I thought, well, maybe I'll take the valves from the new head and put them in the old head and have those cut out. So I was looking at these valves, and I put them on the scale here. So here's an example of an old valve that came out of the old head. I'm going to call it a German head, just the Chinese head and the German head, okay? So we look at this valve. It's 69 grams, 68. Alright, now we're going to take the new valve that's an intake valve, and we put that on there. It says 68. That's pretty good. 69. Okay, same size. So now I'm going to take an older exhaust valve, put that on there, wow, it's a smaller diameter head on the valve, but it weighs more. That's because on the old German heads and the old valves, they had chromium stems. They had those. These things were made to last. And let's take the brand new exhaust valve, and we'll set on there. 69 versus 72. So there's a difference in the weight there. It's supposed to be an 8mm stem, but you know, that tells me that there's a change, and I bet you it's not because of quality. I'm thinking it's more because they cut corners someplace. The springs. Let's take a minute and cover something on the springs here. I've got my scale here, and I'm gonna put a spring on it. This is an original spring. You can see at the base the coils are a little bit closer together, and I'm gonna set that spring on there. Take this little washer spacer off, hit the tare button to zero out the scale. Sorry about the glare. Okay, so it's 0, and I have a bolt that's 1.5 inches long, and I stuck a valve in my drill press, and we're going to take a look at the spring pressure. Now this isn't really scientific, because if I push on the bolt head, I got to come down there, just feel it when it touches. Just when it touches. And it feels to me like it's about 80 at 84. I don't know if that's coming in there. Boy, I can see glare on the screen. I don't know what you guys are seeing. Gotta come down till it just touches and back off. Doggone. That sucks. It's around 80 pounds. Let's just say that, okay? And now we're going to look at a heavy-duty single spring that would probably be recommended for any type of performance camshaft, a minimum. And we're going to do the same thing. And that one says 132 pounds. Yeah, so you can see the difference. And what I did was kind of did an average across here, and the stock springs in the relaxed position is 81 pounds, and in the compressed position was about 133. The heavy-duty single spring in the relaxed position is 127, and compressed 177, and that's only compressing at 1/4 inch, and most valve lifts, even a stock one, is more than 1/4 inch of lift. 1/4 inch would be 250 thousandths, and I think a stock cam does closer to 300 thousandths, and a performance cam can go on these mild performance cams that I use, they're like 420 thousandths. This isn't some this would be a street cam type of a thing. So that kind of gives you an idea on the difference in spring pressures. So next I want to take you over to the engine case, and I did crack the case, and I knew this was going to happen. I could feel quite a bit of a ridge here. This case has been cut once, 20 thousandths, probably at the last rebuilt, and that's first over. And so there's a fellow in town that has one of those Rottler line boring tools, and I asked him if he would take a look at it, and he said that he would go ahead and go 40. He agreed with me. We could go next over, so that'd be second over, and you can go as far as 80 thousandths for the last cut. The thrust, he has a lathe, so what he's going to do is just touch up the thrust area and cut that off the new bearing, so that we're getting into this portion of the case as little as possible, and that seems to be where most of the wear is. Some other things that I found when I took out the crankshaft. The crankshaft is a 10-10 crank. It's been turned 10 on the journals and 10 on the mains, and it does look reusable. I got it wrapped in saran wrap here. There's no point, but I could run my finger on there, and I would have no qualms about using this in a stock application. But I really favor the new crankshafts and the counterweighted crankshafts. 20 years ago, I built this 1776 over here, and I ordered a welded counterweighted crankshaft from one of the major suppliers that's still in business today. And when it arrived, it was a 2020 crank, and this thing's been in service for 20 years. So I guess it's not the end of the world, but my 2110 that I have and my 2-liter, I bought a brand new counterweighted crank, and I really liked them. That chromoly, it's nice. So I thought, okay, I got to have my case cut, and before he can cut it, he wants me to have the bearings. So I went to, and he showed me an engine that he had in his shop that he was working on, and these heads were just gorgeous. They were 40 by 35 valves, which would be nothing radical, a nice set of street heads that would perform. And the old saying was that when they came out with the dual port heads, that a stock dual port head flowed about as good as a tricked out single port head ever would. And that was a great benefit to the Volkswagen performance industry, having the dual port heads. So I kind of figured the same thing with these 40 by 35s. In the Gene Berg book, they said never run the stock heater boxes with the 40 by 35 instead of the stock 35 by 32, and they recommended using a ported, polished stock head on a 2-liter motor, and that it would work just fine with heater boxes. Everything larger than that on a 2110, they said the heater boxes must go. Clock's ticking, and I thought, I'm going to make this a really nice, sweet little motor. I like those 88 heavy-duty pistons, and I think I'm going to go with the new counterweighted crank. And if I'm going to spend the money on a counterweighted crank, it's not a dime more to go with a stroker crank. And I think I'm going to go with a 74. Some people think I'm nuts because once you go with a stroker crank, it costs about the same to build a 2110 or a 2275 as it does one of these small motors. Once you start buying cranks and rods and all that sort of stuff, it adds up. But for the purpose at hand and thinking of heat and just for having a smooth running car, you don't need a lot of horsepower. It probably takes, very little horsepower to drive down the road normal speed limits, and it doesn't make any difference whether you've got a 300 horsepower motor or a 60 horsepower motor. It takes the same amount of horsepower in heat to go the speed limit, and that's what you're doing 99.9% of the time. So I won't run into all the clearance problems, hopefully, that Darren's running in with his 2110, all the cam clearancing and all that stuff that he's doing. I don't want this video getting too long. I want to show you some other things that I found on this camshaft and main bearings. Here's that Engel 100 cam. This is probably your first stage in a performance cam. It's very mild, but it gives you low end torque, and that's what I'm looking for. I come from a totally different background than Darren. I never could afford to get into that drag racing stuff, and I was into the sand and off-road stuff, and just as a hobby, and I wanted to be able to drive my cars and use those engines on the street every day, going back and forth to work. So these are stock connecting rods that came off of this engine, and you can see where the bearing wear over there on the sides of these connecting rods. And what that's telling me is that there's a lot of flexing and stuff going on, and it's probably a good thing that I did take that case apart and look at this stuff. Let's take a look at the engine main bearings. As soon as I split the case and took the look at that big chunk out of that bearing. This was the center main on the top. When I pulled it off, it was sitting down there, and yeah, I don't think these bearings had been prepped, and I don't recall ever going to the extent that Darren did, and I love watching his videos because I learn all this stuff, and it may be common knowledge to everybody else, but I just don't remember doing that, cleaning them up with the white Scotch Brite. It's been so many years, I can't tell you. So I'll leave it at that. Here's the other part of that bearing, and you can see it's got some pits and chips and stuff in it too. But like I said before, it had some decent oil pressure. Here was the here was the lifters that came out of that motor, and if you look through these lifters, I don't know if it's going to show up in the camera, but they're dead flat against each other for the most part. And the lifter faces, I had marked which bores they came out of. This thing was running fine, and the cam appeared to be good when we did it with the dial indicator. It was within a few thousandths of what it would normally be, and I thought that was okay. Here's an example of some very little used lifters, and what I want to demonstrate, and I don't know, I'm looking through the camera lens here, I can rock these back and forth. The center is high, and there should be a little bit of rock back and forth. If they're flat, and you can look at the difference in the I hope you can see the wear pattern here. Here's an old one and a new one side by side. You can see how this is totally smooth, and this one's got a circle around it, and that's the way it should look. But so the cam was worn, and this engine would have run. It was running when I shut it down, and this project's just gone kind of nuts. When I ordered the bearings, I went ahead and ordered those 40 by 35 heads. They look pretty good, and just something I decided I wanted to try. So that's what I did, and so there's my engine update. I hope I'm not leaving too much out. I've got a lot left to do. I've got a ton of cleaning to do on that case, and I really want to get it cleaned out real good, get those oil galleys all cleaned out, and yeah, I don't know. I even ordered a straight cut cam gear just to annoy people and make them think I've got a bigger engine than I do. That may or may not be a good idea, but I'm not too worried about it as far as cracking the case and taking them out if I want to change the cam or don't like the cam. I think what I'm going to use is this 2280, and if I go with the 74 crank and the 88 pistons, that's going to come out to an 1800, and I just think that having the 40 by 35 valves will just make it breathe better. Most of that is for top end racing applications or when you're really revving the engine up all the time, but believe it or not, a nice set of heads, that's where the horsepower and the life of your motor is really is in the heads. And I've heard this all my life, racers say the horsepower is in the heads. So it gives you more bottom end, and it's pretty good for your engine overall. So I think I'm going to go that route. I've changed my mind so many times on this project. I don't know where we're going to end up, but we'll do it together, and I'll keep posting up vids. And I want to thank Darren for sharing all the cool stuff that he does. And if you are interested in having an engine built, I don't build engines for other people. I do this stuff for my own, and I'm sharing this stuff on YouTube just for the fun of it. And if you're serious about really wanting an engine done right and you don't have the tools and time to do it, check out VW Darren. He's got the shop, he's got the knowledge and experience and the tools, and he's got people that race and help him, and I think you would be happy with the results that you got. I used to run out on the sand dunes 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I got started with this stuff, and a lot of the guys were everybody was running 2275s. That seemed to be the engine to get, and hardly anybody was actually building their own. I know a couple people that ordered them from GEX and at FOMOCO, and there were some strange things happening, and out there in the dunes we used to run the Kennedy pressure plates, and we would be jerking on the clutches a lot, trying to do wheelies while we're going up these sand dunes. And I know of 3 crankshafts that were broken while we were playing on the sand. One of them for sure was a cast crank. I think 2 of them were cast cranks and one was a forged crank. We'd go through countless transmissions. We would put beef-a-diffs in them, and it took a long time before we were actually getting good results with our transmissions and changing the gear ratios and beefing up the bottom ends. But a lot of guys just didn't want to do that. They liked the stock gear ratios, they had the big motor, and all the Volkswagen parts 25 years ago were just so easy to come by. You just ran those trannies until you broke one, and then sometimes guys brought a spare one with them and they'd throw them in a day, and we'd be back out on the sand. So yeah, a little bit about the engines. If you really want something that's going to last, then you got to use good parts, and you got to take your time and do a lot of research building it yourself. Very satisfying to have had my engines and some of them on the road for so many years. That way I really get to see the results of my efforts, and it's been fun. So anyhow, this video is way too long. Just wanted to give you a little update. Thank everyone for subbing and watching, and have yourself a good one. Don't forget to do your yoga today. TheEZGZ out.